In Unit 9.1, you saw the architecture of MCC BARS, the 21 statements, the rating scale options, and the 3 evaluator considerations. In this unit, we walk the document itself, statement by statement, M3.1 through M8.3. The exact wording, the meets the standard threshold, and the consideration that lifts each one to exceeds. By the end, you can navigate the resource guide on your own, place any coaching moment with the right consideration in view, and explain to a candidate exactly what the assessor is listening for at any of the 21 statements. The slide names 3 things, and they are 3 different skills. The first is recall, knowing the meets the standard language for each of the 21 statements without reaching for the document. When you are mentor coaching, you do not have time to look up M6.3 mid-conversation. Either you have heard the threshold language often enough that it is in your ear, or you cannot give your candidate clean feedback. The second is precision, reading the actual ICF wording so you know what is being assessed and what is not. Most disagreements between assessors come down to one assessor reading the statement loosely and the other reading it precisely. The wording is the rubric. The third is the call. Which of the 3 evaluator considerations distinguishes meets from exceeds for any given statement? The resource guide does not write that out per statement. You read it from the pattern and from the practice you do here. 3 lenses read every statement, everyone. Extent of demonstration, how fully and consistently the key elements show up in the session. This consideration usually separates below from meets. Did the coach hit the elements of M5.4, or did silence show up only once in 40 minutes? Demonstration is rarely the line between meets and exceeds. Extent of artistry, creative, fluid, skillful, impactful. This is the consideration that lifts a moment from meets to exceeds in the presence, listening, and evoking awareness competencies. C5, C6, C7. The coach is doing the work, and the work has become elegant. Extent of uniqueness. The coach's own voice in the room, not a script, not a template. This coach with this client in this moment. Uniqueness most often differentiates meets from exceeds in the trust competency, C4, and at session opening and close in C3 and C8. Hold these 3 in your ear as we go through each competency. The lens that lifts the moment to exceeds shifts from competency to competency. That is by design. Competency 3, the agreement competency, 4 statements. M3.1, the coach partners with the client to identify the focus of the session. The word that carries the work here is partners. Shared responsibility, not coach-led. If the coach says, "What would you like to work on today?" that is one move. If the coach asks a question, hears the answer, and reflects something back that helps the client name the focus more precisely, that is partnering. M3.2, the coach explores and clarifies several aspects of the topic, goes beyond the surface framing, internal and external aspects of what the client is bringing. The coach is curious about more than the headline. M3.3, the coach confirms the mutual understanding of the desired outcome. Explicit, not assumed because it sounded right. The phrase you listen for is some version of, "When we get to the end of this session, what will be different?" M3.4, the coach notices possible shifts in the conversation and clarifies the desired direction with the client. The session does not stay frozen in the original agreement. As new material surfaces, the coach checks in. The exceeds lens for this competency is uniqueness. The opening and the closing of a session are where this coach's voice shows up most distinctly. The way they greet, the way they confirm, the way they close. Competency 4, trust and safety. 4 statements. M4.1. The coach acknowledges the client's learning or growth at any moment in the session. Specific, not generic affirmation. You are doing great work today is generic. What you just named about how this lands in your body, that is new from the last time we spoke. That is specific. M4.2. The coach recognizes the client's emotions, strengths, or other unique characteristics. Sees the whole person, not just the issue. M4.3. The coach invites the client to share more about themselves, their perspectives, or their identity. Curiosity that holistically supports openness across multiple dimensions. M4.4. The coach demonstrates empathy for what the client has expressed, reflects emotions and experiences in ways that align with the client's worldview and communication style. The exceeds lens for trust is uniqueness. Empathy that lands here is empathy shaped to who this client is, not generic warmth. The same empathic move with a different client would not work the same way, and you can hear that when it lands. Competency 5, presence, 4 statements. M5.1. The coach responds holistically to the client in a manner that keeps the conversation flowing. Holistic means more than one channel at once. Language, energy, body. The coach responds to the whole turn the client just gave. M5.2. The coach partners with the client in ways that support the client's needs, responsive to what is needed in this moment while protecting the client's autonomy. M5.3. The coach consistently demonstrates curiosity, not performed curiosity, real curiosity throughout the session. The marker word is consistently. Curiosity that shows up at minute 3 and disappears by minute 20 does not meet this. M5.4. The coach creates space for silence, pause, or reflection. Uses silence so reflections, insights, and experiences can emerge. The exceeds lens for presence is artistry. At MCC, curiosity and silence are not techniques the coach reaches for. They are the coach's default operating mode. The coach is not deciding to be curious. The coach is curious. That distinction is what artistry sounds like at C5. Competency 6, listens actively. 3 statements consolidated from PCC's 7 markers. M6.1, the coach recognizes the nuances of language, emotions, energy, or behaviors in relation to the client and the client's agenda. Nuance is recognized and connected to the stated agenda, not noticed and dropped. M6.2, the coach's response demonstrates understanding of the client's thinking, feeling, or insight in the moment, not a scripted reflection. The response builds directly on what the client just said in a way that shows the coach was listening to this turn, not waiting for their next question. M6.3. The coach explores what the client communicates in relation to multiple dimensions of the client. Identity, beliefs, emotions, perceptions, core values. The coach is not just tracking the words. The exceeds lens for listening is artistry. Holistic listening rendered as a single brief inquiry, not a long reflective summary. 5 words can do more than 50 when the listening underneath them is right. The coach is not summarizing the client back to herself. The coach is using a brief inquiry to invite the client into deeper noticing. Competency 7, evoking awareness. 3 statements. M7.1, the coach partners with the client to explore and expand the client's perspective. Collaborative. Questions or reflections invite the client to expand their viewpoint, not adopt the coach's viewpoint. M7.2, The coach shares insights, sensations, or observations that support the client in creating new or expanded awareness. The phrase you watch for is without attachment. The coach offers, the client decides what to do with it. If the coach is still attached to the observation 30 seconds later, that is not M7.2 at MCC. M7.3, succinct, open-ended questions, one at a time, discipline of restraint, multi-clause questions, layered questions, leading questions. Those are what differentiate meets from below at this statement. One question, open-ended, then space. The exceeds lens for evoking awareness is artistry. The questions and observations sound like nobody else could have asked them in that moment. There is a fluency to the inquiry that does not feel rehearsed. Competency 8 facilitates client growth. 3 statements. M8.1, the coach invites the client to reflect on what they have learned about themselves, not what was learned about the issue, about themselves. Self-discoveries and ways of being, those are the words from the resource guide. If the closing reflection is about the situation rather than the self, the statement is not met. M8.2, the coach partners with the client to translate insights or learning into actions. The actions emerge from the client's insights. The coach does not prescribe them. Resources, support, accountability, those get co-designed, not handed to the client. M8.3, the coach partners with the client to complete the session, confirms the session has met the client's measure of success, and that the client leaves with a foundation for forward movement. The exceeds lens for closing is uniqueness. The way this coach closes a session sounds like this coach. Not a template, not a scripted final question. The closing has a fingerprint. If you remember one thing from this unit, remember this. Meets at MCC is competence with ease. Exceeds is competence that has become the coach's own voice, applied effortlessly in service of this specific client. Meets is mastery. Exceeds is mastery that has become the coach. The resource guide gives you per statement language for the meets the standard threshold. It gives you one paragraph defining exceeds, applied across all 21 statements through the 3 considerations. That is by design. Artistry cannot be written into per statement language. It has to be heard. The resource guide is the rubric. The listening practice is what makes the rubric usable. In Unit 9.2, you take this framework into behavioral texture, what MCC consistent and inconsistent behaviors actually sound like, the artistry threshold in detail, and calibration across all 3 credential levels, ACC, PCC, MCC, so you can hear the difference between proficiency and mastery in the same recording.